Hello, guys. I'm Sudarshan, a Starshine Star. How are all of you doing? It's a beautiful Wednesday. It is January 14th, 2026. And I have a channel on YouTube. If you're not listening to this on YouTube, it's called It's the Dazzling of the Light. Or you can just go to YouTube and type in at Sudarshan, a Starshine Star to access. I think I'm just getting really close to 300 podcasts there. And a couple are actual videos that you can look. I made a short playlist. And you can just check that out to see if you want to see me actually talking on those. And one of them is really, really good. It's called A Fun Way to Decharge, and it's about decharging negativity. So why not check it out? Thank you for liking, sharing, and subscribing and hitting the notification bell. And why not drop a comment as well? What do you think about all this? I like to begin all of my clips with the 3 opening prayers, which are in Sanskrit and Telugu, and they are short. It's the Guru Mantra, the Ganesha Mantra, and the Gayatri Mantra. Before I do that, I command on the sacred blood of Jesus the Christ, Yeshua, to flow over all of us and all of our beloveds, all of our human beloveds, and all of our animal beloveds. Please cast out the spirit of pain, cast out the spirit of fear, cast out the spirit of lack and poverty and scarcity, cast out the spirit of ill health, cast out the spirit of derangement, insanity, confusion, fogginess, cast out the spirit of brokenheartedness and excessive grief and grieving. Cast out the spirit of bitterness, of revenge, envy, jealousy, hatred. Cast out the spirit of self-dislike, self-rejection, and the projection of that onto any other beings. Please, Yeshua, cast out all satanics and all satanic attachments. Cast out all demonics and all demonic attachments. Please send your healing presence now. Please heal the wounds in our souls. Thank you, Yeshua. We receive your healings and your blessings. Amen. Swaha. I also command on the presence of Mother Mary to be here with us ever more completely and fully in this eternal moment. For Yeshua and Mary, or Miriam if you will, are for everyone. It's not about religion. Truly, spirituality is cosmic, and it goes far, far beyond any man-made constructs of that which we call religion. But that doesn't mean that I'm suggesting to reject religion. Whatever one's faith is that gives good fruits, and one really enjoys that path and feels it is righteous, beautiful. So thank you so much, Mother Mary. Thank you so much, Yeshua. Amen. Svaha. And now to the prayers. Om, 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 Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshvaraha, Guru Sakshat Parabrahmam, Tasmai Sri Guru Vena Namaha. Om Shuklam Bharataram Vishnum Sishivarnam Chatupujam Prasanavaranam Dhyaye Sarva Vignyupashante. Om Bhur Bhuvasuvah Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhako Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yonaha Prachodayat. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Excellent. In case I forgot to mention, that was the Guru Mantra, the Ganesha Mantra, and the Gayatri Mantra. As I said, they are in Sanskrit and Telugu, and I do this to bless, uplift, purify, and protect you, me, and this clip. So I haven't decided what I'm going to call this clip yet, listener. Something about Tim Walz getting caught and a lot more. So I will decide it. I'm going to record it first because I prepared this in the wee hours of it's either very late last night or early pre-dawn this morning, however you choose to look at it. But I'm only able to right now to sit down and to record this podcast. So let's go. This was some information. It's very good from Dr. Steve Turley. And what he called this little blurb, he called it, Tim Walz just got caught faking financial records in state audit. Imagine this, federal prosecutors estimate that up to $9 billion, but I have to interrupt listeners because it's been confirmed it's really $19 billion, not just 9. But let's go on. That up to $9 billion meant for kids, the disabled, the poor, was stolen in one state alone. $9 billion. Auditors then catch government employees fabricating and backdating documents to hide the mess. And the governor of that state is now being told that either he resigns or he's leaving office in handcuffs. This isn't a movie plot. This is Minnesota. And the Tim Walz scandal is spiraling into something that could reshape the entire debate over welfare, immigration, and accountability in blue state America for generations to come. Meet Minnesota's own legislative auditor, Judy Randall. She's not a politician. She's not a pundit. She's a career numbers and paperwork person with nearly 30 years in the office of the legislative auditor. And yet, despite those years of experience, nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared her for what she was about to encounter. She called it, quote, the most egregious case of corruption and fraud she's ever seen, end quote. Her team dug into the Behavioral Health Administration at Minnesota's Department of Human Services, the division that hands out roughly $200 million a year in grants for mental health and addiction treatment. And what she found wasn't just sloppiness. It was a systemic effort to rewrite history on paper. Auditors asked for routine oversight documents. You know, things like proof of site visits, monitoring, proof that services were actually delivered, just basic stuff. At first, astonishingly, the DHS said, "We don't have those files. Those files don't exist." And then once auditors pressed them saying, "Oh yes, you do, because legally they have to exist," suddenly the documents appeared several weeks later. And at least one was created from scratch and backdated by 2 years to make it look like it had always been there. And they found that that was the pattern. They fabricated the documentation. The auditor, Judy Randall, she told lawmakers that multiple employees in the Behavioral Health Administration created or backdated documents after the audit began across the entire grant oversight process. She called it a systemic effort to deceive. It wasn't simply forgetting to upload a PDF. These are officials knowingly falsifying the record to make it look like oversight happened, when in fact it did not, and intentionally did not. And the paper trail gets worse. One grantee tied to a North Minneapolis church, the Wellness Collaborative through Zion Baptist, received a $1.6 million grant. Auditors found that DHS had no documentation whatsoever to prove that the services taxpayers paid for were ever delivered, even as church representatives insist they did the work and are now being scapegoated. Oh, spare me. In another case highlighted to Congress, a grantee was paid nearly $680,000 for a single month of work. Think about that, $680,000 for a single month, and yet couldn't produce a single invoice or participant data. Oh, and you'll love this. The grant agreement totaled about $1.6 million. And the state employees who approved the money left the DHS within days. And then guess where that former state employee went to work? They went to work for that very same grantee. Isn't that amazing, listener? Geez, what are the odds? Talk about a revolving door. So we've actually caught at least one instance where DHS worker approved $1 million grant without any justification, then quit his or her DHS job and went on to work for the very organization that this now former DHS worker gave over $1 million to. I mean, the corruption is patently blatant. It defies belief. But this is Minnesota. This is Tim Walz's Minnesota. This is the fraud that we're finding wasn't merely incidental. It wasn't peripheral. It was woven in and throughout the entire state and local government system. Tim Walz is the fraud. Mayor Jacob Fry is the fraud. Ilhan Omar is the fraud. On top of that, auditors found DHS failed to conduct required site visits, like the ones that independent journalist Nick Shirley did when he found this here at Future Leaders Early Learning Center. And he shows a clip. I love this part of the clip. It's so good. Nick Shirley, listener, goes to, as he's going around, which I'm sure you might have seen. There's one part where he's going to this Future Leaders Early Learning Center. And no, it's not the infamous original Leering Center, but anyway, and when he goes to the door, someone actually opened it. This Somali woman, all wrapped up in a slate blue, full garment. It's not quite chador because her face is showing, but, with the hijab and the flowing robe, so you only get the round face showing through all the fabric. But this woman, she has such a personality. I couldn't help but like her because of the faces she was making, even though she's, a fraudster. I don't like her fraud, but she had a little bit of a comedian in there with the faces she was making as she kept saying no to Nick Shirley. But anyway, so Nick says, before he goes to the door, he says to the, as he's making this podcast, he says, video, he says, this building received over $3 million. And then all of a sudden, someone opens the door, which was unusual for any daycares. And he said, hello, how are you? I would like to see if I could bring little Joey, my son, little Joey here. Is there paperwork or can I check out the daycare? And this Somali woman, she looks at him kind of in bewilderment with a comic bemusement on her face and then shakes her head. No. Nick, no? Why can't I check out the daycare? And then the lady stares at him for a while. Then she says, manager not here. And Nick says, okay, but if I can get paperwork or anything to submit my son, little Joey, to come in here for daycare. She looks at him for a beat or two, and then she shakes her head. No. Nick, we'd really like to put Joey in this daycare. We've heard great things. The lady, business card? Nick, no. I would like your business card, actually. And then the lady, she fumbles and looks at her phone for a minute. Then she says, talk to manager. And then Nick says, okay, can I speak with somebody? And then she shakes her head again. No. Nick, where are the children at? Are there children here today? She shakes her head. No. Nick, no children? The lady says, yes. Nick, why are there no children? Then she says, next coming at 2:00. Nick, would my son, little Joey, have friends to play with here? And she emphatically shakes her head. No. Nick, no. So, no friends for little Joey? And then lady says, yes, sorry. Nick, dang it. Well, have a great rest of your day. So anyway, back to this reading. So it shouldn't surprise you that when the auditors themselves went out to conduct the site visits, they too discovered what they called, quote, serious concerns that services were not being provided at all, end quote. In fact, they found that fewer than 1 in 5 surveyed DHS workers even felt trained to properly scrutinize how grant money was being spent. The DHS audit uncovered nothing short of mass corruption, fraud, and incompetence. Oh, and by the way, did I mention, to add insult to injury, this was already the second audit of that same division. The previous audit caught many of the same failures. So these were repeat problems that had not been fixed despite earlier warnings. Obviously, at some point, incompetence stops being a believable excuse. Now, zoom out. While Minnesota's bureaucracy was fabricating paperwork after the fact, federal investigators were uncovering what they say could be the largest welfare and Medicaid fraud crisis in modern U.S. history. An estimated $9 billion, and then, once again, listener, I'm interrupting, the total fraud from the Somali community in Minnesota. And there are a few non-Somalis involved in that. But it's now said to be $19 billion. So anyway, he says an estimated $9 billion stolen through schemes tied to childcare, autism services, housing, Medicaid programs, the Feeding Our Future scandal alone, the one that centered on that Somali restaurant, which, listener, it was called Safari Restaurant. That Somali restaurant that claimed it was feeding hungry kids. I think they're the ones who, where Ilhan Omar did her celebration banquet after her 2018 congressional victory. That scandal alone involved over $250 million stolen from taxpayers. 78 defendants have been charged. Almost all of them, over 90%, are of Somali descent. Federal prosecutors in the House Oversight Committee now say that that scandal was just the tip of the iceberg, one piece of a much broader web of fraud that pervades Minnesota's social services system. And one man, the governor, has been overseeing it all for years, and now his reckoning is at hand. In Washington, the House Oversight Committee held a hearing literally entitled Oversight of Fraud and Misuse of Federal Funds in Minnesota. Chairman James Comer accused Tampon Tim, along with Attorney General Keith Ellison, of being complicit in the rampant fraud. Republican House Majority Whip Tom Emmer took it further. He called on Walz to resign, warning that if he does not, he might be leaving office in cuffs. Now, for me, I'm not particularly sure why it's an either or, okay? Just like that corrupt judge, Dugan of Milwaukee, who was found guilty of a felony and trying to help an illegal alien escape from law enforcement, right from her own court. She had to resign, and she's facing jail, right? The two are not mutually exclusive. Nevertheless, as we all know, Walz did drop out of the race for governor. He won't be seeking another term in office. So this scandal clearly has legs. It's already claimed at least partially a victim. It's already obliterated his political future, at least at a national level. But we're more and more learning about Walz's own involvement in this culture of corruption at the highest level of Minnesota politics. We're now finding out that whistleblowers, again, we're talking hundreds of social workers and government employees, raised alarms about this fraud years ago, but they were suppressed. Those concerns were not just ignored, they were openly and overtly opposed by Tim Walz himself. In fact, there are reports that he and his administration were blatantly intimidating and threatening those whistleblowers with retaliation if they went public. So it looks like his dropping out of the gubernatorial race is just the first of the consequences that Walz will be inevitably facing. In the meantime, the Trump administration is escalating. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins has frozen roughly $130 million in USDA funding to Minnesota and Minneapolis over massive fraud and lack of accountability. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has announced a massive IRS audit of financial institutions that facilitated the laundering of Minnesota funds. And I want to interrupt here to say, listener, also, Secretary Scott Bessent also made it very clear 2 days ago that in regard to the special federal task force that are focused solely on this type of fraud, there's also a division that has tapped into the international banking transfers and follow the money, et cetera, all the money that went out of the U.S. because of these frauds into other countries, like Somalia and Kenya or wherever it might be. That's being traced, as well as the criminals that left the country are being traced. And so this is all going to come to a conclusion of the criminals being extradited, having to answer for their crimes, as well as money being returned or assets seized and being stolen, being sold. I can't even get the word stolen out of my mind with this great fraud. Assets being seized and being sold to recoup the monies that were stolen, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so back to this. Vice President J.D. Vance announced a new Assistant Attorney General position with nationwide jurisdiction over fraud, saying it will work. Its work will start in Minnesota and then expand across the country. Homeland Security agents and a multi-agency task force are already, of course, on the ground in Minneapolis. And this is all just the prelude. Make no mistake, these are just the opening credits to the movie. Representative Comer has called Walz and Ellison to testify under oath in a congressional hearing where they'll have to answer on camera whether they were clueless or complicit or even a bit of both. While billions vanished, state workers were allegedly forging the records. Virtually every single department of the federal government is now involved in this. The DOJ the Agricultural Department because of the food programs, the Department of Education, at least what's left of it, because of the learning program, or better, the leering programs, Health and Human Services, the Treasury Department, of course, ICE, and Homeland Security, since so much of the fraud was being perpetrated by Somali nationals, the SEC, because of interstate activity. Virtually every single federal department is swooping down on this scandal and has a vested interest in prosecuting and punishing all those involved. You've been wanting to see handcuffs. Well, with this latest scandal, you may indeed be getting your wish. And that was the end of that. And now I'm going to this other great, I've never seen this. It's a channel, it's called @HUD, HUD channel on YouTube. And it seems like there's something called Washington Watch with Tony Perkins. And I had to laugh at that name because when I hear Tony Perkins, listener, I can't help but think of, the actor Anthony Perkins, who was well known to be the lead in the movie Psycho. That wasn't his only acting role, of course, but probably his most famous one. But I laughed at that when I saw Tony Perkins. But God bless this Tony Perkins. Anyway, so he has, Tony Perkins of Washington Watch has on Secretary Turner, and the title of this is Secretary Turner Uncovers 509 Dead Tenants in Minnesota. So here's Tony talking. He said, the massive fraud scandal in Minnesota that captured the media's attention has spurred action across the Trump administration. Of course, that was the underlying fraud that brought the Homeland Security up there. That's created the what we see, all this conflict. The Trump administration really has a whole of government response to this corruption and this fraud that's taking place in Minnesota. And what we're finding out is like an onion. It's layer upon layer. Well, last week, the administration announced the creation of a new division in the Justice Department for national fraud enforcement because it apparently goes beyond the boundaries of the borders of Minnesota. And the Agriculture Department announced in suspension of federal financial awards to Minnesota and Minneapolis. Well, last month, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, HUD, sent federal employees into Minneapolis and St. Paul to conduct their own investigation. And what have they found out? Well, we're going to be joined by the Secretary of Department of Housing and Urban Development, Scott Turner, to give us an update on what his department has discovered there in Minneapolis, in Minnesota. Secretary Turner, welcome back to Washington Watch. Thanks so much for joining us. And then Secretary Turner says, all right. Thank you, Tony. So good to be here with you, sir. Always Happy New Year. Tony, Happy New Year to you as well. Now, we were just talking about the investigation that you've launched into Minnesota, into St. Paul. I realize the investigation is going to take some time, but what can you tell us about your department's efforts on this? What have you found out so far? Secretary, yes, sir. Tony, thank you. So we have boots on the ground in Minnesota, and through our fraud prevention, we have found that there is likely over 84 million in ineligible assistance that was given to the state of Minnesota during the Biden administration, including almost $500,000 in improper assistance to over 500 dead tenants. And so you think about that, Tony. Over $84 million of hardworking taxpayer money that was shelled out during the Biden administration in improper assistance and serving over 500 dead people with almost $500,000 of assistance. This is a lack of stewardship. It's gross negligence. But I'm grateful at this time that our team on the ground has found these improper payments, and we will hold those accountable that are responsible for this. Tony, Secretary Turner, when you look at this combined with what has happened what was happening in the daycare, I mean, this looks like it's coordinated. It looks like this is a criminal conspiracy. It doesn't just look like people taking advantage of another government program that doesn't have the proper oversight. Secretary, no, it is. It seems like it is coordinated, and you have every stone that's being unturned shows us really the negligence and turning a blind eye and the lack of financial controls and really the lack of caring about the American people and taxpayer money that goes to fund these programs in Minnesota and other places around the country. And so I know under President Trump, Attorney General Bondi, the vice president, who now has announced a new associate attorney general to go after the fraud, waste, and abuse in our country. I'm so glad that we have this opportunity to be transparent before the American people and root out this fraud and bring those to justice who have really criminalized the programs that were meant to help American people in need. Tony, what is the connection between this fraud and abuse of taxpayer money and illegal immigration? Secretary, well, as you know, over 12 million people came across our border, and I want to interrupt listener to say that's really well over 20 million people, but he's saying over 12 million, and I'll agree, yeah, it's well over 12 million, but I'm going back to Secretary Turner. Over 12 million people came over across our border. Illegal migrants, illegal aliens came across unchecked, which has really caused the housing supply in our country to be squeezed. It's caused the cost of housing to go up. Nearly 100% of the rental demand in states like New York, California, is due to illegal immigration. And so this has been a great burden on our country. But I'm thankful to the President, to Secretary Noem, Mr. Homan, and others that have secured our border. Just here at HUD, we found that over 59% of illegal alien families use one or more of our welfare programs here in America, costing about $42 billion a year. And so with that, we have to turn the faucet off and use American taxpayer money to serve the American people, and American people only. We are very intentional and focused on that at HUD as it pertains to housing and the programs that come out of our agency. Tony, Secretary, we have just about 45 seconds left. You've been partnering with the faith community and churches to address homelessness nationwide. Very quickly, tell us about that. Secretary Turner, yes, sir. You know, we want to allow and bring the faith-based organizations back to the table as it pertains to serving our homeless neighbors. During the Biden administration, they really were, quote unquote, stiff-armed and could not come to the table to compete for our Continuum of Care competitive grant. So now we want to open that back up. Faith-based organizations like Our Calling and others around the country are really the ones with boots on the ground serving our homeless neighbors. And we don't want to just house people, Tony. We want to house them, treat the root cause, get them transformed and back to a life of independence. Tony, Secretary Turner, always great to see you, my friend. I know you've got a special project coming up for the 250th, and listener, he means the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States of America in July. And then he said, we'll get back to you and talk about that. So I have more to say on this, but I'm just going to end this here, listener, and then please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell. What do you think about this? Drop your comment. I like to read them. But please keep it respectful. I appreciate differing opinions. I don't want or require or need anyone to be a yes man or a yes woman, but please do keep it respectful. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I'm going immediately after this to record another short podcast. Again, an extension of this issue, but I don't want to make this go too long. So thank you so much for listening, guys. I like to end all of my clips with a closing prayer, which is very short in Sanskrit and Telugu. And what I'm saying is, God bless all beings in all worlds. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Wonderful. Peace, peace, peace is what we're all looking forward to after this great cleanup and scouring of our earth realm has taken place. Yes. I'm sending much love and big hugs to you and yours. God bless you and yours. I'll see you when I see you. And bye-bye for now.